Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the presentation. So in this presentation, at the beginning, I'll talk about the whole process, like why we're even doing it, what device we use to measure, what we're doing during the session, what results we're getting, what data we're getting, and then how we process these results. We'll try to explain what value we get and how whole system works. First of all, it's in general what we're trying to do, because there's this belief that you can, with your consciousness, do some kind of action, that you can affect the matter with your consciousness. There's this belief, and therefore we probably cannot use our consciousness for such a things as self-healing, even distant healing, maybe climate balancing, and world peacekeeping. So we hope with the project we can answer the question whether we're able with our consciousness or even collective consciousness to affect at least water, and because we use water as a sensitive system. And if it will be able to do, then we would go into how to actually do it, trying different techniques, etc., etc. And for experiment, we use this device, electron impedance spectrometer. Here's the two channels of water. And usually during experiment, we focus on one of the picture of this channel, this or this. And it works as a differential spectrometer. So if we affected this channel stay as a control. And then we can compare, okay, this one wasn't affected. We were not affecting this one, and we were affecting this one. Let's see whether there is difference. But after like many experiments, we noticed that sometimes even if you're affecting one channel, another channel reacts. And maybe that's because they kind of stay in the close location from each other. It's about 5 or 10 centimeters between them. So in general, during the experiment, we process the signal, or not signal, the measurement from both channels as from one channel. And in each of these chambers, there's distilled water, and we have electrodes. Everything actually stays also in the thermo-isolated container, so there is no fluctuation of the temperature. Like everything should be very stable, because measurements are really precise. And this device also was important. It's working just 24 hours a day, constantly working. And when we book session, for example, today at 7:30, this device had already recorded for many sessions before. And this allows us to see what was happening before we were affecting and during our effect. So here, for example, you can see as a typical graph, which we get after each session, whether it's passive or whether it's active session. Active session is when we affected, and passive session, it's when no one was affecting the sample. Because as I mentioned, it's working always every 30 minutes, it's kind of creates a session. And if someone was kind of present at this session, it's active because someone tried to actively affect the sample. And in each this graph results, in the gray area, it's actually the 30 minutes when someone was trying to affect. And also we can see the background measurement before, sorry for the noise, before our experiment started. So we can also see right away whether we were able to, whether we were able to do some effect. So just a little bit more about this graph. There is many lines you can see. And as I mentioned, there's two channels, number one, number two. And these first two lines, red and black, it's impedance of the water sample. First water sample and second water sample. Red is first, black is second. And then green and blue, it's a temperature of fluctuations of those two samples. And based on this measurement, we calculate so-called psi value. Psi value, psi value, it's we kind of take changes during these 30 minutes and compare them during 1.5 hours before the session. So if this, for example, went, so let's check the temperature. It's here is really good shown. If we see like temperature jumped really high compared to the base background measurement, our psi value of these two channels will be pretty high. And here you can see that impedance of the samples compared to the background measurements, kind of you wouldn't say there was any effect. Everything calculated, of course, in numbers and specific values. It's not just on your eye. You can say, there was effect or there was no effect. And what we do next, so for example, we did effect, we made a session, like for example, today we will have session in maybe 15 minutes. It will be active session. And then to calculate so-called pro values, we take in consideration this session and 47 previous passive sessions when no one was influencing. We're taking those psi values of each session, and total we have 48 those psi values, and then we arrange them from lowest to highest. You know, like if analogy would be, you have, for example, 48 students in the class, and all of them do the test. And then after they do the test, each of them got mark. And you one of those 48 students. And for example, you got a pretty high mark. Then when we arrange students, so the first one would be with the lowest mark, and then higher mark. So if pro value is 90%, your pro value, it means that you are top 90% of the class. And it's pretty good value to be there. It's show that impact was significant. But again, even in the passive sessions, you can see from this slide, in the passive sessions, when no one was influencing, this such a psi value also can be achieved. This is like very important thing. It's not like during each active session you make water to behave super different from what it can do. It's more like the water have its like own life, but sometimes with your intention you can kind of push this psi value and therefore get the higher pro value. For example, analogy would be, you have this type of the dice with 48 sides, and the average value, mean value of this dice would be 24.5. You know, if you throw the dice like 1,000 times, and then you calculate all your results from those 1,000 times and divide them into 1,000, you will get average value 24. So in some way, this device is also as a random dice, because water behaves like differently, all time differently, but and the average pro value would be for this device is 50%. But even there's other approaches how to study the consciousness, etc. And one of them also, you can technically throw a dice many times and with your consciousness affect. For example, you always wish to get 48. So after you throw the 1,000 times your dice, maybe you calculate your average. You calculate all of this, sum all the 1,000 values and divide them 100. And if you'll get, for example, 35 value here, that will be very different from 24. And then you can conclude that yes, with my intention, without maybe cheating, with my intention, I was able to roll the dice in average higher than regular mean value. So same approach with this device. We do every time experiment. We try with our attention, affect the water, affect its temperature, its conductivity. And if after, of course, we need to have many sessions. At this moment, we have 8 sessions, but it's already something. if maybe after many sessions we see that our mean value is very different from 50, for example, like 70%, then we can conclude, yeah, we were able to affect the water. So it's different. Pro values are different from just random, because if we would just random, we would have 50%.